today with East Anglian Air Ambulance. I've very kindly got Neil involved to chat with us a little bit about what they do, how it runs, and how it all helps. Well, it helps everyone, but how it helps us bikers, because we use them a lot, unfortunately, but we do. So yeah, tell me a little bit about the charity and what you do.
So we're the East Anglian Air Ambulance charity. We are a 24/7, 365 days a year service, and we provide critical care across the east of England, predominantly to the counties of Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire and Bedfordshire. Okay, so 4 counties and 2 bases?
Yes,
we have a base in Norwich and we have a base in Cambridge. Both of them are 24/7. Norwich is 24/7 with an aircraft 24/7. Cambridge is 12 hours a day with an aircraft, and they don't fly overnight, so they do 12 hours overnight with a rapid response vehicle.
Okay, that's good to know. So if there's a call at night, more Cambridge way, does the Norfolk and Norwich one go out?
Yeah, whichever one's closest. So it's probably important to remember that we're not just a helicopter service. We use ground platforms as well, and sometimes if the job is 5 minutes down the road, it's just quicker to drive to the job. So we have a car that's kitted out pretty much identically to the aircraft, and if it's quicker to go by car, we'll go by car. But predominantly because of the nature of the east of England and the geography, we tend to fly to most of our jobs because it's going to be quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. How long have you been, because you were a normal paramedic first, weren't you? And then you've gone over to the air ambulance.
Yeah. So I'm still a paramedic, and that's my background. I've been a paramedic for almost 25 years. I joined the ambulance service and worked directly for the ambulance service for 10 years. And I then became seconded to the East Anglian Air Ambulance in 2009 and worked for them I'm still with them, but I left the NHS 3 years ago. I'm directly employed now by the East Anglian Air Ambulance and have been for coming up for 3 years.
Wow, that's quite a long time to be doing it. Do you prefer being in the air ambulance role, or just helping people is the main priority here?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people who work in healthcare have a desire to help people, and the ambulance service was and is a great opportunity to do that. I think, like any job, when you've been doing it for a while, you're looking at, what else can you do in addition to that role, or can you branch out into other areas of healthcare or within the ambulance service? Within the ambulance service, the East of England Ambulance Service support the East Anglian Air Ambulance to deliver care by seconding paramedics to them, and they recruit every few years. And I went through a recruitment process in 2009 and was very fortunate to be recruited as one of what we call a HEMS paramedic. So that stands for Helicopter Emergency Medical Service. And it wasn't something that I always wanted to do, but it was an opportunity that came about, and I was very lucky at the time to be offered a position, and I've never looked back since. I've just, consider myself to be very privileged and lucky and fortunate to have spent 15 years essentially working frontline on an air ambulance.
Yeah, that's impressive. So you say they recruit. Is that like from different districts of the sort of normal ambulance?
Yes, I mean it's changed a lot because of the way that the NHS has changed over the years. So probably 15-ish years ago, ambulance services merged to become bigger ambulance services. So instead of it being, let's call it, it was the East Anglian Ambulance Service, which incorporated Norfolk and Suffolk and Cambridgeshire, but they then joined with Essex and Herts and Bedfordshire, which were separate ambulance services, to form the East of England Ambulance Service. So when we recruit now, we recruit from the East of England Ambulance Service. So it is those 6 counties. Obviously, if we are looking to recruit people who are going to work in Norwich full time, the likelihood is they're they're going to be from the local area.
Yeah.
But we also have a base in Cambridge, so Cambridge is completely different, geographical area, and that actually opens up opportunities from people from Cambridge, Suffolk, Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, because it's not that far away.
Yeah.
Norfolk is a bit different; it's a bit kind of up and out on a limb.
Yeah.
So yeah, we recruit from a huge pool of paramedics. I think there's approximately 4,000 staff in the East of England Ambulance Service, and there are probably 1,000 to 2,000 of those are paramedics. So it's a huge pool, and obviously what that tells you is it's very difficult to get a job working on the air ambulance because of the level of competition.
Yeah, yeah. Do you need to have further qualifications to do it, or is it just if you've passed like your normal paramedic, can you straight go on the air ambulance?
I mean, the sort of the simple answer to that is no. You do need to have additional qualifications, and so like what we call the essential criteria when you recruit someone, the essential criteria is a high level of clinical education or training, and it's not exact. It changes sometimes in terms of what organisations want from their clinicians, but we expect individuals to have a degree. That's not always a given. As a paramedic, as a nurse, you can become a paramedic with a diploma. So we like our paramedics to have a degree. We like them to have a number of additional courses that they've undertaken and qualifications, particularly in resuscitation. So there's real high expectation. But the reality is when you've got that number of paramedics to recruit from, you want to recruit the very best paramedics, so that allows you to have an essential criteria that is quite competitive. But we're also quite open and honest with that, so it allows people to know and understand what they need to achieve in the future to be able to apply for a role as a HEMS paramedic. Okay,
yeah. So because you carry more on an air ambulance than a normal ambulance would do, wouldn't it? And then you have the further qualifications. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like if you can put someone to sleep on the roadside, can't you? So if they're that injured or needed to be put, you're allowed to do that as a normal ambulance, can't?
Yeah, I mean the answer is yes. I suppose the best way to describe it is that the ambulance service provide an extremely high level of care. However, air ambulances who recruit specialist doctors and paramedics into their service provide an additional level of care. We call it an enhanced care team. And what that means is, I mean, you gave a great example. One of those examples is pre-hospital emergency anaesthesia. So it allows us the ability to put someone to sleep outside of a hospital, which historically is reserved for hospital practice and anaesthetists in hospital. And the question is, well, why would we do that? Well, actually, there's a number of reasons, but probably the most simple one is someone who has an airway problem or a head injury. They're two good examples. It's sometimes easier to manage that patient and to treat them, and it's better for them in terms of their outcomes if you put them to sleep and you take over their ventilation. And it's a bit more complicated than that, but that's one of the reasons why we do that. And that's one of a number of interventions that are delivered by pre-hospital teams in addition to what the conventional ambulance service will deliver. So we try to offer something over and above the conventional ambulance service. There's no point in us being there. If we're going to arrive at sea, we need to offer something that the ambulance service does not offer, because otherwise they would just get on and do it. So that's not to say that they're not capable and they're not qualified and they're not skilled. They're all highly skilled clinicians. It's just we bring a high level of care to the roadside.
Yeah, so it's like having the A&E team roadside for you, and it's just that extra
some people do describe it as saying it brings the emergency department to the side of the road. That is probably the best way to describe it, because we recruit generally emergency medical physicians and anaesthetists into our doctor roles, and they tend to be the specialist, or that's the specialist area of medicine that fits best with pre-hospital emergency medicine. So yes, it's a very high level of care that's provided.
Yeah, which in that situation, if you've been called, that's what you want. You want you out there. So with that, how much difference does it make to the situation going on and to the outcome to a normal land ambulance? That's
a really good question. So actually what you need to demonstrate that is research and evidence. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, yes, we provide a very high level of care, and yes, of course, we make a difference to patients, but that doesn't actually mean anything unless we can demonstrate it with research and evidence. So part of our organisation is committed to research and audit and innovation and development. We have that's called a RAID team, but we employ academics to undertake pre-hospital research to try to demonstrate some of the things we've just talked about, that they make a difference in terms of patient outcomes. It's actually really hard to produce meaningful research anywhere, particularly outside of a hospital, because of ethical considerations and a number of other reasons. But on our website, for anyone who's interested, you can look at all of the research that we do, which is fairly significant for what is a relatively small organisation, and we produce a fair bit of research to try to demonstrate the value of what we deliver.
So they check out the website for the research, but obviously then go and buy air. So you've dealt with everything, and it's the choice to go to the hospital. Go and buy air is obviously a lot quicker. What makes you decide that actually they're actually okay to go by road, or let's take them in the air ambulance? So
I mean, there's two different things to that. One is we use like a regional tool, which is developed by the East of England Major Trauma Network, and they basically produce a tool which is called a trauma triage tool. So this is for trauma patients, not for medical patients. And that gives us guidance in terms of what patients should go to a trauma centre. So within our region, we have one major trauma centre, that's Addenbrooke's. And there's a certain criteria for traumatic injuries that if you tick any one of those boxes, that the guidance suggests that you would be better off being treated in a major trauma centre. So we follow that. That's a tool. But actually, because we're an enhanced care team, as we were talking about earlier, we are also allowed to use our own clinical acumen and our own decision making as to what we think is best for a patient, because sometimes people don't always fit quite neatly into a box, but their injuries might be consistent with a hospital that has additional capabilities. So if you use the local one to here, the NNN as an example, that's a specialist cardiac centre, but it's not a major trauma centre. So they have the ability to deal with trauma, but they would struggle to deal with patients who have suffered major traumatic injuries. That's not to say that they couldn't, but the commissioning in this region says that those patients should go to Addenbrooke's, and they focus the money in this region, in this part of the world, on the cardiac aspect of the Norfolk and Norwich. So I probably haven't explained it too well. It's a bit more complicated than that, but actually what we use is two different things. So these tools that give us some sort of overarching guidance as to what patients fit into the criteria of needing to go to a trauma centre, and also our own clinical decision making. And there's some obvious ones. So if you think of things like Addenbrooke's has capability to they have orthopedics, plastics, vascular surgeons. So if you have an injury where you require those specialties, you're going to need to go to that hospital, because the Norfolk and Norwich or Ipswich or some of the other hospitals, they don't have all of those capabilities. The main one is neurosurgery. So Addenbrooke's is the only hospital in our region that has neurosurgical capabilities. So if you have a head injury and you're bleeding into your brain, you're not going to see a neurosurgeon in one of the local hospitals. You'll need to go to the trauma centre, and that's really where probably it's best to use that as an example to give you the best sort of idea of why we would take patients to certain hospitals. So is it just Addenbrooke's and Norfolk and Norwich that you deal with, or could you, if you were closer and it weren't horrendous injuries, could you land at Ipswich or? So you can go to. So within the East of England, which is the area that we work in, we're predominantly in this part of the world, we're in Norfolk. So we're going to deal with the 3 or 4 hospitals that are in our area. But you basically you have two choices, really. When you go to a patient, what's the nearest hospital that is what we would call a trauma unit, and do the injuries that the patient have suffered, do we feel that hospital can deal with those injuries? So that could be Ipswich, West Suffolk, it could be the James Paget, Kings Lynn, any of those hospitals. I think there's 16 trauma units in our region and 1 major trauma centre. So that's the first decision. Do we go to the nearest hospital? So if you're in, where we live, let's say kind of Suffolk, you're going to probably pick, as in East Suffolk, you're going to pick Ipswich as your local hospital.
Yeah.
But if you've suffered injuries that are not consistent with the capability of that hospital, you're then going to look to go to Addenbrooke's from a traumatic point of view.
Yeah.
Medicine is the same in the sense of if you've had if you've got a cardiac problem, then depending on the time of the day, some hospitals don't have they're not specialist cardiac centres.
Yeah.
So the same exists for medical patients as well as trauma patients. I guess the best way to describe it is every hospital has some kind of specialty. As in Chelmsford's in our region, that's a burns unit.
Yeah.
So you're always looking to where is the best hospital for the patient. But really the key is I guess what makes a difference, this comes back to your previous question, is having experienced clinicians who make timely and appropriate interventions and take the patient to the right hospital the first time. That's really what sums up making the difference for all patients, trauma or medical.
Yeah. Does the time difference affect it? Because obviously flying to Ipswich to flying to Addenbrooke's, obviously it's a longer distance. Does it? Because obviously you're, like we just said, the emergency department on the roadside, so...
Yeah. So depending on patients' injuries or illness, some are time sensitive. So if you have what we would call like an expanding head injury in terms of you're bleeding into your brain and it's expanding and getting worse, where it probably makes sense that the sooner you see a neurosurgeon to remove that expanding injury in your brain, the better. Mm-hmm. So there are some injuries, and they'll still put time frames on it in terms of can you get there within a certain time frame, but realistically, the sooner you get to a centre that can treat your injuries, the better.
Yeah.
There are some where that's not quite the same. You know, like actually another example of time sensitive illnesses is cardiac centres. So if you have a blockage in one of your coronary arteries, and let's call that a heart attack, well, actually, the sooner you have that blockage removed, the better. Yeah. So we try to get, so time is of the essence. So if you use a helicopter and that can get you there 20 minutes quicker than a land ambulance, then there's always going to be some benefit. But there are some patients where, because of what we talked about in terms of bringing the emergency department to the roadside, where we can undertake timely, appropriate interventions, where actually we don't necessarily have to rush to the hospital because we've delivered the initial level of care that's probably these are the ones where it's not necessarily life-threatening, and we've treated their injuries, and now they'll need a specialist to treat their injuries, as they move on in their injury pattern, if you like. Yeah. So yes, but in the main, time is of the essence. And there's a phrase that we've got it on one of our walls. It's a bit of an old one now, but and it relates to trauma, and it says that trauma is a disease of time. Basically meaning that the longer it takes you to get to hospital, the more that you allow the disease to develop, in this case the disease being trauma. That's not always the case. If you break your leg, as long as you treat that injury at the scene, it shouldn't get any worse, and you shouldn't risk losing your life if you're treated in the right way. And actually, if you see a surgeon in an hour or 2 hours, probably not going to make a huge amount of difference. Mm-hmm. But going back to the brain example, that clearly would make a huge difference. Yeah. Could really affect the outcome of someone's life.
Yes. So going from that, because obviously in that moment because everything's going on around you, there's a poorly patient, normally there's other people around because there's a road accident or something. How do you cope and deal with the stress that it all brings? Because obviously you've got to try and stay calm for your sake and the patient, and how do you cope with that and making the decisions whilst everything's going mad around you?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. I think the truth is that we're all human beings. We all have emotions and fears and anxieties and worries and concerns, and it doesn't matter what job you do. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is a job where those anxieties and fears are right there in front of you, because you're dealing with someone in some circumstances. What you do does make the difference between life and death. So I think the best way is to try not to look at it like that. Is the reality is whoever is working on any given day, they are trained and equipped and supported to deliver the highest level of care, and you rely on that. experience helps. You know, if you've been doing the job for a few years, that clearly helps, because the more you do something, the better you get at it. That's the reality, isn't it? It doesn't matter what job you're doing, and you become more comfortable with those difficult situations that you can refer back to. You've got the experience of having been there, seen it, and done it. So when you start the job, it is a challenge. There's no two ways about it. It's really, really hard. You're going to deal with things, in any given week that the rest of anyone who's not doing that job probably wouldn't see in their lifetime. So it is a challenge, but I think everybody deals with it differently. You have to accept that if you're going to do this job, you're going to see some horrific things, literally things that are some of the, like your worst nightmares. There's no dressing that up, but you have to be the kind of person that can deal with that. And I don't necessarily know what is dealing with it. Probably don't really want to get into the weeds of that, but what is dealing with it, I guess it is being able to know that you're working in a supported environment where you have help, you have people who care about you, you can talk about it openly. We use our teams that we work with as like support mechanisms. The charity are really good at providing additional help if it's needed. And you rely on the fact that actually what we're trying to achieve here is trying to save people's lives, and that doesn't always happen, but we do our absolute best, and we don't just sometimes make a difference to patients' lives. It's about families' lives, friends' lives, that kind of stuff. So you try to take all the positives, the simple things, the little wins. You can take lots of positives from something that's pretty horrible, but you do have to accept that you just will see some horrible things. And I can't speak on behalf of how everybody else deals with it. I deal with it. I'm very lucky. I've got a good family around me, and that really helps. I think if you don't have a strong foundation in terms of your home and personal life, that can really affect your ability to do this role. And I think probably the times in the past that we've seen individuals that have struggled is when actually maybe their personal lives are not rock solid. And that's the same for all of us, isn't it? We all have lives where things change, and relationships and what have you, and but that does have an effect. So we just, as an organisation and the ambulance service, work really hard at supporting their staff to make sure that if people need help, they get help. And try to, like everything I've just said, there's some horrible things we see, but try to enjoy it. Come to work with a smile on your face. It's a beautiful place to work. We work with amazing people. We do some amazing things. We see some amazing patients who come back and visit. Enjoy it as best you can.
It's a rewarding job.
Super rewarding.
So you were saying about the support and stuff around you when you're making those decisions, because obviously you've got a crew with you. Is there one person in charge of that, or do you sort of all just take control of what's going on?
So it's always about the team. We have what we try to create what we call a flat hierarchy. Ultimately, someone has to make a decision at some stage, and that's fine, that's acceptable. But everything is done as a team, because if you make a decision as a team, it's much easier. You reduce the pressure that you're under to make a decision without checking with someone. So some of the decisions that we're making are very, very difficult decisions, and what we do as an organisation, we're a training service, and we train our clinicians, and we continue to train, and we undertake lots of simulation-based training. We have what we call concurrency and compliance requirements, which means that you have to stay. You have to ensure that you are up to speed with all of our standard operating procedures. You have to make sure that you have undertaken essentially every intervention or skill that we deliver. You have to do that over the course of a year, whether that's in a training environment or actually in reality. So the real key to delivering a high level of care is training. Is the more you train, the better you get. If you've been doing a job for 10 years, really you've got no excuse for not being good at that job.
The funding and how it goes, and so you've got your main bed of supporters. So what do they bring to you, and how do they work?
None of what we do would be possible at all without the goodwill of the people of the East of England. So our supporters, people who donate money to the charity, but not just money, people who donate their time, so volunteers. So we rely heavily on, our organisation wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the people that support EAAA, and we're very grateful for everything that they do.
And that comes, like we said earlier, it comes in all sorts of forms, from the fundraising to the lottery and everything. So They are great people to have, and obviously like your biggest supporters. So that's a good thing.
There's a real variety, so it can come from areas where we receive large donations, which we're very grateful for, but equally we're just as grateful for like my local village recently had a village fete, and 50% of the income from that fete went to the local church, and 50% of the income went to the East Anglian Air Ambulance charity. So we're just very grateful for anybody that wants to get involved in fundraising, donating, supporting the organisation in whatever shape or form that might be.
Yeah. So anything from, even like we were saying earlier, word of mouth, it just helps support you as a charity and what you do, doesn't it? So massive thank you to all the supporters as well.
Absolutely. And it's about the reach. We try to raise the profile of the charity so that people who don't know who we are, who live in the east of England, it's up to us to try to engage with those individuals so that they do know who we are. And that might not mean that they will necessarily take up our lottery, but if they're even if they're talking about the organisation, that word of mouth, that reach to allow everybody to understand the importance of your local air ambulance charity and the importance of supporting your local air ambulance. Yeah,
perfect. Massive thank you to them as well.
Thank you.
Over the two teams that you've got, you up to 6 flights in the 24-hour period.
Yep.
So for me, that seems a lot for an air ambulance, because obviously we're normal people. You just sit about occasionally, or you see it on the news, or the air ambulance had to go out. You don't actually realise just how much you actually have to go out to things. And obviously that's a lot of money. So isn't all charity funded? Is there anything from the government coming in from it, or is it how does it keep going?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge undertaking. So we essentially, I think on average, 6 to kind of 8, I think about 8 taskings per day, potentially up to 6 patients per day, 2 bases, 24/7. But you have to remember there's a huge geographical area that we cover. So the east of England is a huge area.
Yeah.
So anybody who suffers a significant traumatic event or a critical illness that we're likely to be tasked to. So when you think of the size of the area and the population, I think it's it's over 5 million people within that population area. I think it's about 7,500 square miles as a geographical area. So it's a huge area. You might need to check my numbers. So yes, and for us to deliver that, obviously that costs money. So medicine's expensive, aviation is expensive. If you put the two together, it's really, really expensive. Everything that we do, so every piece of equipment we use is just hugely expensive. The clinicians that work on the aircraft, they're very, very expensive. So essentially we receive almost no government funding, and we generate we need to generate just over £19 million per year to keep the entire operation running at both bases. We get a bit of support from the ambulance service in terms of they second paramedics to us. So it's not direct income, but they do second paramedics to us, and that's part of I guess that's their commitment to the fact that we provide a service on behalf of the ambulance service in their region, and they provide us with the paramedics to do that. But in terms of direct government funding, a couple of occasions over the years where we've received some grants and stuff, but outside of that, we generally need to make £19+ million every single year.
Flicking really back really quickly, because obviously it's not majorly government funded. The equipment that you've got in there, is that NHS supplied?
So some of the consumables that we use do come from the ambulance service. So we're essentially like an ambulance base, if you like. So all over the country, the NHS will have ambulance stations, hospitals, as you well know, and we are able to use the procurement of the ambulance service. They essentially treat us like an ambulance station. So some of the stuff, we tend to use equipment and consumables that is not really what the conventional ambulance service use. So most of what we use is actually different, and we have to order it in separately. And and particularly the big ticket items, is in terms of like monitoring type equipment. So things like, our multi-modality monitors that, will look at your heart rate, oxygen levels, all that kind of stuff. They're hugely expensive. We pay for them ourselves. Things like ventilators, blood gas analyzers, like blood warming machines, all the kind of the standard typical equipment that we carry, we pay for ourselves. But we do get some support from the ambulance service in terms of some of the smaller consumables. So as an example, like if you want to use a standard oxygen mask, we get them in from the ambulance service. And obviously they would order thousands of them, so we benefit from their sort of, the economies of scale of them ordering big numbers, and we benefit from that. So we do get some additional support from the ambulance service when it comes to not necessarily equipment, but certainly some of the consumables that we use.
Yeah, it just popped into my head, like, because obviously funded, like, I didn't think of the actual stock that you have to carry and that lot. And like you just said, that's funded by you as well. So yeah, the biggest thing that I can say on this, and not even just to bikers, to everyone, is maybe look into your local air ambulance, do some research on it, and if you can fundraise or you can donate, please do, because yes, you may never need it, but someone will. And yeah, I think it's incredible what you do, especially with no funding, and you're changing lives each day, and I think it's brilliant. So all I can do is say thank you so much for letting me come down and having a chat and learning lots, because it's surprised me how much more that you do than what we just see on the telly and on the news and stuff. So massive thank you for what you do. And yeah, let's do some more fundraising and keep it going. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure to talk to people who have an interest, particularly when they're looking to support their local air ambulance charity, like you said. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it.